Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and today we have a mini edition of Celtic transfer talk, I suppose. I know, middle of November, not even the January transfer window yet, and we're talking about players that Celtic want to sign. Seems a wee bit off, doesn't it? But it's that time of the season. The international break's getting to everybody across all aspects of journalism, whether it be print, media. Everybody is desperate for content, including myself, which is why we're talking about this today. But Celtic are almost back, so that makes up for it. Let's try and talk about this. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. It's been a brutal international break, to say the least, with not too much to talk about. But we're still trying. We're putting out the content every day, and apologies for any sort of... I mean, in wrestling, they would call it ring rust. I'll call it camera rust here. Apologies if I seem off or anything like that, or I'm stumbling over my words. It's been a while since I've just sat one-on-one to the camera talking about things with you. It's felt like an eternity, in fact, because all the videos this week have been, past recordings and stuff. So, we've got stuff to talk about. As I said, it's kind of a mini Celtic transfer talk, which is strange. So let's try. Celtic are back on Saturday though. Hallelujah. I genuinely have never been happier in my life. Now, before we do start discussing this story, straight off the bat, I would like to say it is that time of year. That time of year where I need to encourage you all to take all of these links with players with a pinch of salt. We're not even into January yet. There is going to be a lot of names who will be linked with Celtic between now and the end of the January transfer window. It gets to that point. We're talking about a Bosman rule signing today, and basically everybody who will be available on the Bosman rule this January will probably end up linked with Celtic at one point or another. So yeah, it's that point of the year, names will fly, but that's not me discrediting the story today or whoever wrote the story. If anything, I think it's quite a decent source that it's come from, so we'll discuss it as we do each and every single transfer story. I'm just saying, take everything with a pinch of salt. It's not gospel, and let's get into it. So Mark Hendry, now of 67 Hill, reported this morning that Celtic have emerged as a transfer suitor for £9 million rated Burnley star Vincent Kompany, once described as very important. The article went on to say that one man who has been seen as an interesting option at Parkhead is Burnley's Josh Brownhill. 67 Hill understands that the midfielder has been tentatively spoken about within the Celtic Park corridors as they look to bolster their options. Brownhill has a number of clubs interested, and there's potential suitors from Italy and Saudi Arabia. That's understood there's likely to be more sizable financial packages on the table from elsewhere. However, the Englishman can sign a pre-contract away from Turf Moor in January, with his deal at Burnley expiring in the summer of 2025. He joined Burnley for a fee of £9 million in 2020. His contract's up at the end of the season, and it doesn't look as though it will be getting re-signed at any point. And as Mark Hendry has reported this afternoon, apparently a potential option for Celtic and their midfield next season. As I said earlier on, never going to discredit the source that is Mark Hendry. A few reliable pieces from him before. He used to be over at Football Scotland now. I think one of the chief editors at 67 Hill. And yeah, as I said, some reliable stories in the past, so I do believe there's somewhat truth in this, but it's one of those ones that people will jump straight away and think, oh, that must mean Celtic are going to sign Josh Brownhill. It doesn't necessarily mean that. He's being looked at as an option. What I always find most interesting about these sort of stories is the bigger picture that comes from it. The reason I say that is Josh Brownhill is a player who, number one, has been looked at from a number of different clubs. And number two, plays in a position where Celtic already have a stacked amount of talent. And we've just spent £11 million on our club record signing Arne Engels, a central midfielder. Josh Brownhill is a central midfielder. And does this maybe foreshadow that Brendan Rodgers expects change in the centre midfield going into next season? Are we maybe expecting the departure of Rio Hatate, for example, and preparing to bring in Josh Brownhill? Because Josh Brownhill, who is currently only 28 years of age, is a guy who will be 29 in December, to be fair. I'll throw that out there very quickly. But at 29 years of age, by the time he would join Celtic, is somebody who, playing the amount of games that he does right now as captain of Burnley, would probably be expecting to play a lot of football at Celtic. So when I say I always look at the bigger picture from these is, if you're going for someone who's on a decent wage, playing a lot of football, captaining a side which could very much be in the Premier League next season and was in the Premier League last season, that must mean that Celtic are generally just looking at first-team midfielders, first-team central midfielders to sign next season. Is Josh Brownhill the right one? That's probably down to you to decide, but he certainly is a name that's been mentioned. He's played 15 times for Burnley this season in the Championship, scoring 5 goals from central midfield, by the way. 9 goals in the last 2 seasons, including 4 in the Premier League last season. They currently sit 4th in the English Championship as they try to make their way back to England's top flight. But it looks all but certain that he will be leaving Burnley and he won't be involved whether they're in the Premier League or Championship next season. Very interesting that names that have been mentioned already, Saudi Arabia and Italy, involved at looking at Josh Brownhill. For me, already takes a huge chance away for Celtic signing him. Don't get me wrong, I think that Josh Brownhill is a good player. I've watched him play. I watched him play in the Premier League last season for Burnley under Vincent Kompany. I've watched him play a couple other occasions whenever Burnley have been on the TV in the Championship, and he's a great footballer. He's one that would, and I'm not even going to beat around the bush, he'd stroll it up here, probably, he'd fit into the team, I reckon. I think he would be a good signing. But when you hear that he's involved or in conversations maybe with the Saudi Arabian clubs or Italian clubs, I think that already takes a monumental kind of shift away from the chances of him signing for Celtic. I just don't see it happening. I think he's a name that will be mentioned and be forgotten about, just like a few of those kind of similar moulded players came in the summer window as well. If you remember right at the back at the start of the summer transfer window, Chris Mepham of Bournemouth was mentioned, who he kind of was coming to the end of his Bournemouth career, was mentioned with a potential move to Celtic. His name was apparently going round the corridors of Celtic Park as well. He never signed. And I feel like that always happens with kind of mid-table English players, you know, guys that could be playing at clubs like your Bournemouths and your Burnleys and your Crystal Palaces. Jeffrey Schlupp was another one that was brought up in the summer as well. I feel like it's a recurring trend. So I'd be genuinely surprised if Celtic did end up signing him, but by no means it doesn't mean I'm saying he'd be a bad signing. I understand there's still other English clubs looking at him. Fulham's name was in the mix. Apparently David Moyes really wanted him at West Ham in the past, so they could still be in the mix as well. There's going to be a lot of competition around Josh Brownhill's name. I don't expect to see him sign for Celtic, I must say, but it's interesting that it's came out today. As I said, I think it really lets you look into the bigger picture surrounding things. I generally think there's another central midfielder who people would rather see sign ahead of Josh Brownhill, and then when more names come out, there'll probably be even more. And one of them, of course, is Lon Miller. Once again, I can't make this clear enough that I think Josh Brownhill is a great player. I think he'd be a great fit at Celtic and he'd be quality for Celtic. I really do. And you might not agree because he's playing for Burnley in the English Championship, but he would be a good signing. Just don't see it. But I think if you were to go around and ask 10 Celtic fans who would they rather, Josh Brownhill or Lon Miller, I think that 8 out of 10 are maybe going to say Lon Miller for different reasons. And obviously Lon Miller isn't at that level yet where Josh Brownhill probably is, because, well, there's 11 years difference between the two of them, first of all. But Lon Miller ticks a lot more boxes for people, I think, and myself included. I would rather have Lon Miller. I'd rather go out and spend £5-6 million on him than sign Josh Brownhill on a free. I'd rather give minutes to Lon Miller over Josh Brownhill, because I think we need to look forward. And Lon Miller's a big part of looking forward. I think he could be a big part of Celtic for years to come. I think that at his age, you know, to bring him in and develop him at Celtic would be better than getting someone like Josh Brownhill, who would be here for 2-3 years hoping that he's good enough, and if he's not good enough, then you've paid him a wage for nothing. And obviously Lon Miller has that homegrown criteria which helps for European competition. So I think that a lot more people are just generally interested in the likes of Lon Miller over a Josh Brownhill. And I mean this out of all respect, but I don't think Josh Brownhill is a name that's going to get many excited. Now, that's not me speaking personally. I just don't think that, I mean, it's not as if this name is doing the rounds on social media that much. People have seen the story, they've looked at the story, and they've kind of met it with they've not met it with general excitement or Celtic go get him calls. You know, it's it's just Josh Brownhill. It's not the most exciting player to be linked with. So I think people are just generally more interested in the availability of Lon Miller this summer rather than Josh Brownhill, who's certain to move club. But listen, it's good to know that Celtic are doing their scouting, they're doing their business, and they're constantly looking at ways to improve. One thing that Brendan Rodgers and the Celtic scouting department can't do right now is rest on their laurels. They can't get comfortable with the squad that they've got. That's a constant door here at Celtic. You know, it's a revolving door that never stops. Players will leave next summer, just like players left this summer. We lost Matt O'Reilly, we had to replace him. Next year could be Rio Hatate's turn. We don't know yet. I'm not going to speculate that Hatate's definitely off. Just saying, out of everybody in the central midfield area, he's probably the most likely. It's a constant revolving door, and Celtic need to be prepared for that. So it's comforting to see Celtic doing their business and scouting players, whether it's Josh Brownhill, Lon Miller, Christ, even if it's bloody retired Tony Cruz. I don't care, as long as they're looking at central midfielders and they're looking at players in all areas, they're doing the business they should be. Talking about Lon Miller, there was actually a story about him the other night which appeared on Go Radio. It was Mark Guidi who was talking about him, saying that he expects Celtic to be in and around the conversation for him, but has confirmed he knows of interest from elsewhere. Once again, you can choose to believe what people say and where it comes from. He said on Go Radio that there is interest from Italy, he's sure, because they do their homework and scour the market, and he knows that 100% there's interest from Germany and Spain, and obviously down south. I've no doubt that Celtic and Rangers have registered an interest, and I've got a feeling he will end up at Celtic. So Mark Guidi, speaking about the apparent interest in Lon Miller, of course, one that we're going to have to keep an eye on. It's going to be an interesting January, that's what I'll say. A very interesting January. And I think that's about it. It's not the most exciting of stories for today, but it's something, you know, it's something, and that's what matters most, because boy howdy has it been quiet. So I'm just glad to be reporting on something at least. So yeah, if you have enjoyed, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But until tomorrow, and until the Celtic Thunder comes out on Friday, take care, enjoy yourselves, and I'll see you all next time.